Marcus didn't slow down. The man stepped directly in front of him, a faint smirk on his lips. "Didn't think I'd see you again," Officer Grant said. Voice low but heavy. Marcus's eyes met his, steady. "Airports are public spaces. I have the right to be here." Grant gave a dry chuckle. "Sure, but people remember faces. Some don't forget." "Some," Marcus replied, "should." The sound of rolling wheels and boarding announcements swirled around them, but the air between the two was still. Marcus's hand rested lightly on his carry-on. He didn't flinch. "You cost me everything," Grant muttered. "Career, friends. My reputation's shot." "That's not what I cost you," Marcus said. "I just held up a mirror." Grant's smirk faltered. He glanced away, jaw tight. "Look," he started. "I was having a bad day. Things got out of hand." "No," Marcus interrupted softly. "You made a choice. Bad days don't create racism, they expose it." For a moment, Grant's shoulders sank. The crowd's noise seemed to fade, even though it hadn't. "You think you won?" Grant's tone was quieter now, almost asking. Marcus shook his head. "This isn't about winning, it's about stopping it from happening again." A final boarding call echoed overhead. Marcus stepped to the side, not breaking eye contact until he passed. Grant didn't follow. He just stood there, rooted, as if his own feet had decided he wasn't going anywhere. Marcus didn't look back. Some silences aren't meant to be filled. Marcus didn't break stride, but his voice was low. "Move." Grant's smirk deepened, like Marcus's tone was exactly what he'd been waiting for. Still got that edge. "Guess prison doesn't take it out of everyone." Marcus stopped the crowd flowing around them. "You don't know me." "Oh, I know enough," Grant said. "Saw it in your eyes that day, the moment you realized who had the power." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he stayed still. "And you liked it?" Grant's smirk shifted just enough to show he'd heard the truth in the words. "I enforced the law. You enforced yourself," Marcus replied. The space between them grew heavier. People glanced as they passed, but kept moving. Grant's fingers twitched at his side, a flicker of something, anger, or maybe doubt. "You think you're clean now?" Grant asked. "Like none of it matters." "It matters," Marcus said quietly. "That's why I'm still standing here." Grant's voice dropped. "I lost my badge because of you." Marcus leaned in just enough for only Grant to hear. "No. You lost it because you thought that smirk was permission to treat people like they were beneath you." For the first time, Grant looked away. His smile wavered, replaced by something closer to a frown, not aimed at Marcus, but at himself. An announcement echoed overhead. Marcus adjusted his bag and stepped past without another word. Grant didn't follow. He just stood there, smirk gone, as if he wasn't sure what to do without it. And for Marcus, that was enough. Double quotes, "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." Marcus stopped mid-step. The words weren't loud, but they carried sharp, enough to slice through the dull airport hum. Passengers glanced, curiosity flickering before their eyes slid away. He turned. The officer's stance was firm, but his expression held that slight upward twitch, not quite a smile, more like a test. Marcus's voice was calm. "And why is that?" "Random screening," the officer said, without blinking. Marcus let the words settle. He could feel the shift, a familiar unspoken sorting. His bag strap creaked under his grip. "Out of everyone here," he murmured, "I'm the one you stopped." The officer didn't answer right away. The pause was too long, and Marcus caught the flicker of something. Recognition, maybe, just procedure. "Sir, your procedure has a type," Marcus replied. His voice was low, but it carried. A few passengers lingered, their pace slowing as if waiting for the next move. The officer's jaw tightened. "Sir, say it," Marcus said. The officer's eyes narrowed. "Say what?" Marcus stepped closer, just enough for his words to stay between them. "Say the part you're holding back." For the first time, the officer's gaze dropped, not far, just enough to betray the break in his grip. The tension hung thick and unrelenting. Marcus adjusted his bag. "You've already told me everything without saying it." He stepped past. The officer didn't stop him, but behind him, the sound of footsteps faded into the terminal's steady hum. The sentence, just a handful of words, stayed lodged between them, heavier than anything the officer could have written in a report. And Marcus knew the man would hear it again long after he was gone. Grant's jaw tightened, like he wasn't used to being asked that. "Routine security check," he said flatly, his gaze sliding past Marcus as if looking for backup. But Marcus didn't move. "Routine checks usually start with a reason. What's mine?" His tone stayed even. No sharp edges, no raised voice, just enough weight to make the air feel heavier. A couple of passengers slowed their walk toward the gate. A woman whispered something to the man beside her. Grant noticed, and his shoulders stiffened. "Sir, I'm not here to debate," Grant said, but his words lacked the confidence they carried moments ago. Marcus let a small silence hang, then tilted his head slightly. "I'm not debating. I'm asking for clarity." The quiet between them stretched until it felt unnatural. Grant's radio crackled, but he didn't answer it. "You fit a description," Grant muttered finally. Marcus's eyebrows lifted almost imperceptibly. A description. He didn't press further, just repeated the words like they were enough to stand on their own. Someone behind them coughed. The gate agent glanced up from her screen, her eyes flicking between them. Grant shifted his stance, but Marcus didn't give ground. "If that's the case," Marcus said softly, "perhaps you should check your description again." There was no anger in his voice, only the kind of calm that makes arrogance stumble. Grant opened his mouth to reply, but the weight of the onlookers seemed to press on him now. For the first time, he looked directly into Marcus's eyes and found no fear there, only patience. That patience was louder than any protest could have been. Grant stepped back half an inch. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first crack. Grant's reply carried that pause, the kind that made truth feel just out of reach. "We've had reports." His voice landed flat, but the weight behind it was designed to end the conversation. Marcus didn't blink. "Reports no one's heard of," he said quietly, as if tasting each word. Grant shifted his feet, the creak of his shoes, too loud in the stillness between them. "Sir, I can't share details." "Or there aren't any," Marcus said, not moving an inch. A couple at the gate stopped pretending to look at their phones. The gate agent's fingers hovered over her keyboard, listening now. "This isn't the place," Grant muttered, scanning the small gathering eyes. "It became the place the moment you stopped me," Marcus replied. His tone never rose, but it pressed harder with each sentence. "So go ahead, tell me what's in those reports." Grant's jaw tightened. "Suspicious behavior." Marcus let the words sit in the air, refusing to fill the silence for him. "Walking to my gate." Grant exhaled sharply, as if annoyed Marcus wouldn't play his part in making this quick. "You match someone we're looking for," Grant finally said. "And that someone," Marcus let it trail, giving Grant the rope to finish. Grant's eyes slid away. "It's not personal." "Of course it is," Marcus said, softer than before. "That's why you can't say it." For the first time, Grant's posture faltered. The attention of strangers wasn't helping him anymore, it was burning. Marcus didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply shifted his bag onto his shoulder, the gesture steady, deliberate. That calm was louder than the accusation. And Grant, for all his authority, had nothing left to say. "Sir, please," Grant said again, softer now, but it wasn't a request. It was control wrapped in politeness. Marcus didn't sit. "You've already made this public," he said, nodding slightly toward the row of seats. "They're watching." Nobody turned their head. They didn't have to. Their ears were already tilted his way. A man pretended to scroll through flight updates. His thumb hadn't moved in a while. A woman glanced up, met Marcus's eyes for a second, then looked away too quickly. The air was thick with that familiar mix, curiosity and fear. They weren't here to help, only to witness. "Can leave quietly," Grant murmured. Marcus leaned in just enough for only Grant to hear. "Quiet's what lets it keep happening." A teenage boy across the aisle shifted in his seat, his mother's hand pressing down on his arm. The silence between them stretched. Even the announcements over the PA felt distant, like they belonged to another place. "You think I'm here for you," Grant said finally. "I think you're here because someone saw my skin before they saw me," Marcus replied, his voice steady. Grant's mouth tightened, a faint crack in the mask. "That's not." "Don't finish that," Marcus interrupted. Gently. In the corner, a man with a coffee cup lowered it slowly, eyes flicking between them. The crowd's stillness became its own statement. They were watching without watching, present without standing up. Marcus stepped back half a pace, not retreating, just shifting the weight. "You've already decided who I am," he said. "I'm just deciding who I'm not." The words hung there, and even those avoiding his gaze felt them. Grant didn't reply. The crowd stayed silent, but the silence had changed. Grant's shadow stretched over Marcus, close enough that their breaths almost met. The space between them was now no wider than a clenched fist. "You think standing there means something?" Grant's voice was low, almost conversational, but it carried weight. "It means I'm not moving just because you told me to," Marcus said, steady. Around them, the crowd didn't shift, but the air did. People became quieter without realizing it, as if the floor itself were listening. Grant's eyes flicked downward, Measuring, you're not as tall as you think. Marcus tilted his head slightly, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Authorities not measured in inches. That landed harder than either expected. Grant's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, his gaze faltered, not away, but inward. Marcus could feel the shift. He didn't press. He didn't need to. You've got a mouth on you, Grant muttered. But it sounded less like an insult and more like a defense. Maybe, Marcus replied. Or maybe you've just been talking so long you forgot what it's like to be answered. A man near the back coughed into his fist, covering something that might have been a laugh. Grant heard it. His jaw worked. Marcus stayed still, his calm growing heavier than Grant's stance. You want me gone? He said quietly. But all I've done is stand here. Grant leaned in, close enough that Marcus could see the faint sheen of sweat at his temple. You think you're making a point? I already did, Marcus answered, eyes locked. And everyone here heard it, even if I never said it out loud. Grant stepped back half an inch. Not enough to look like retreat, but enough to feel it. The cuffs bit cold against Marcus's skin, the steel locking with a finality that made a few people flinch. You're done, Grant said, voice low, like he didn't want the room to hear, though everyone already had. Marcus met his eyes. Done with what? Grant hesitated, just long enough for the air to notice. You think this is? Marcus's voice was steady, almost to calm. The first time someone tried to shut me up. A woman near the gate shifted her bag, her eyes darting between them. Grant leaned closer. You're under arrest. For standing here. Grant's jaw tightened. For causing a scene. Marcus gave a small, almost tired laugh. The only scene here is the one you're making. Somewhere behind them, a phone camera clicked. Grant's eyes flicked toward the sound, then back. You don't want this getting out, Marcus said quietly. Not the way it's about to. Grant's fingers twitched on the cuffs. You threatening me? No, Marcus said. Just telling you the truth. It's heavier than you think. The space around them felt smaller now, like the crowds. Silence was pressing in. Grant's voice dropped. You have no idea who you're talking to, and you, Marcus said, his voice still level, have no idea who's watching. Grant's gaze slid past Marcus to the growing circle of strangers, phones raised, eyes fixed. The cuffs rattled faintly as Marcus adjusted his stance. Neither man moved otherwise. Then Grant stepped back. Not much, but enough. The click had already done its damage. The room had shifted, and both of them knew it. Grant's grip on the cuffs eased, but he didn't let go. The hum of the terminal felt louder now, like every sound was leaning in. You think you're special, he muttered. Marcus didn't answer. Right away, his eyes held steady, but his voice was quieter when it came. I think I'm not the first. Grant's jaw twitched. Not your first stop, Marcus said, and definitely not your first victim. A flicker passed across Grant's face, not guilt, not yet, but something unsettled. Marcus kept going. How many times have you done this? Different face. Same reason. You don't know what you're talking about. Grant's tone sharpened, but it lacked the confidence it had minutes ago. Marcus tilted his head slightly. The thing about patterns is they don't hide forever. Behind them, a woman's voice cut through the air. I've seen him before. Did the same to my brother last year. Grant's shoulders stiffened. He didn't turn toward her. Marcus leaned just enough for the words to stay between them. They're remembering Grant. Right now, a second voice joined in. Same thing happened to me. The cuffs felt heavier in Grant's hands. He glanced at the phones, more of them now, recording in silence. This isn't about you, Grant said, though it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Marcus's reply was soft. It's always been about me. To you. The space between them thinned. Grant's authority wasn't gone, but it had shifted, cracked under the weight of recognition. Marcus didn't pull away. He just stood there, letting the crowd do the rest. Somewhere in that quiet, Grant's hands slipped from the metal. The click of the cuffs opening wasn't loud, but it was enough. ChatGPT said. The hum of the terminal still rang in Marcus's ears as he leaned against the cold wall. The officer's retreating footsteps echoing somewhere down the gate corridor. He wasn't the first. He knew it. Seen this before, came a voice beside him. An old man, weathered hands gripping a cane, stared out at the runway. 2 hours they kept me once. Missed my granddaughter's wedding. Said they were just following procedure. Marcus didn't answer. His jaw tightened. The old man's eyes drifted over. You think complaining helps? They write it down. Smile like they care. Then nothing. A gate announcement crackled above them. A teenage boy shuffled past, red-eyed, clutching a half-empty backpack. His mother trailed behind, muttering under her breath. They pulled everything out, she said to no one in particular. Left his homework on the floor. didn't even apologize. Marcus caught the boy's gaze. Just for a moment, shame and exhaustion stared back. The old man sighed. Happens every day. You just happen to have an audience. Marcus's fingers tapped against his boarding pass. And when no one's watching, they get away with it, the old man said quietly. A silence settled. People passed by, too busy to notice. Marcus's chest rose slowly. Maybe, not this time. The old man tilted his head, measuring him. Marcus looked at the boy again. The kid was still staring. He gave a small nod, almost imperceptible. The boy blinked, then turned away. The announcement for Marcus's flight came. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the gate without looking back. The weight of stories that were never told pressing against his spine. Grant didn't look up when Marcus stepped into the narrow security office. Papers sat in neat piles, coffee steaming on the desk. You wanted to see me. Marcus's voice was flat. Grant leaned back, lacing his fingers over his stomach. Just making sure there are no misunderstandings from earlier. Misunderstandings? Marcus asked. The word slow. Grant smirked faintly. We've got rules, procedures. I follow them. Everyone does. Marcus glanced toward the door, where another officer leaned against the frame, arms folded. He wasn't there for conversation, he was there for presence. Rules, Marcus said quietly. Funny how they work for some people more than others. Grant's smile didn't fade, but his jaw shifted. I don't make the rules, I just keep things running smooth. Smooth, Marcus echoed. You mean without anyone in charge asking why you keep doing the same thing to the same kind of people? A silence hung. The other officers' eyes narrowed. Grant picked up his coffee. You think you're gonna change the system by making noise? Marcus didn't move. I think noise is the only thing that makes people notice the walls you hide behind. The officer at the door straightened slightly. Grant's smirk faltered for the first time. You've got a flight, Grant said, more clipped now. Yeah, Marcus replied, turning toward the door. And you've got a job that only works as long as no one's watching. The pause that followed was heavier than anything else in the room. Marcus stepped out without another word, but the air inside the office stayed tight, as if the walls themselves had been named. The boarding lounge hummed with the low chatter of travelers. Marcus sat near the window, phone untouched in his palm, eyes on the tarmac where planes taxied in slow arcs. His father's voice still echoed in his memory. Not the words, but the tone. Always walk through their rooms as if you own none of their shadows. A woman in a crisp navy uniform stopped a few feet away. Mr. Hale, boarding will begin shortly. First class will be called first. Marcus nodded once. I'll wait. Her brows twitched, like the refusal didn't fit the script. She lingered, then stepped away. He'd been here before, not this gate, not this city, but this space where you could feel eyes deciding who you were before you spoke. Years of diplomatic dinners, security checkpoints, lounges where the welcome felt conditional. A man across the row glanced at Marcus's boarding pass in his hand, then away, pretending he hadn't. The call for first class echoed. Marcus rose, slowly, walking toward the gates. Another agent scanned his pass, her smile too practiced to reach her eyes. Long trip? She asked. Long life, he said quietly. Something in his tone made her pause before gesturing him through on the jet bridge. The cool air carried the faint scent of metal and jet fuel, smells that had followed him since childhood. He adjusted the strap of his carry-on, step steady, posture even. Every airport, every lounge, every passing glance had been another lesson. Dignity wasn't just how you carried yourself, it was how you refused to let them carry you. He stepped into the cabin. He didn't just take his seat, he claimed it. Sir, I'll need you to open it, Grant said flatly. Marcus kept his hand steady on the zipper. It's already been cleared. Not by me, Grant replied, eyes sweeping the small crowd behind them. Marcus unzipped the bag, laying it open. Grant didn't search, he tore. Shirts yanked out, folded edges ruined, shoes dropped to the floor. You're always this thorough? Marcus asked, voice low. Grant didn't answer. He lifted a folder, flipping through papers with 2 fingers like they were dirty. The onlookers pretended not to stare, their reflections caught in the glossy airport tiles. Marcus saw a woman glance away quickly, guilt flickering before she turned back to her phone. Traveling for work. Grant's tone was casual, almost mocking. Marcus nodded once. Yes. What kind? Work that lets me buy a first-class ticket, Marcus said, holding his gaze. For the first time, Grant's jaw twitched. He shoved the folder back, edges bent. You people always get defensive. Marcus felt the weight in his chest. Not anger, just the familiar ache of being seen and unseen at the same time. We just noticed the pattern, he replied. A quiet settled. Grant zipped the bag halfway, then left it open, clothes spilling out like evidence of nothing. Marcus bent down, folding each shirt back into place. His hands were slow, deliberate, not for Grant, but for himself. You can go, Grant muttered. But his voice lacked the certainty it held moments ago. Marcus lifted the handle and walked away without looking back. Behind him, the crowd had scattered, but the silence they'd left behind was heavier than the noise. Some humiliations weren't loud. They didn't need to be. ChatGPT said. Marcus felt the weight of their stares, though no one met his eyes for long. He pulled his bag closer, clothes still unsettled inside, the zipper refusing to close smoothly. Across the terminal, a woman leaned toward her companion. It's always the same, she whispered, low but not low enough. A man 2 seats away shook his head. Why him? There's no reason. Marcus kept his pace slow, steady, as though control was something you could rehearse. His chest ached, not from anger, but from the exhausting familiarity of it all. He reached the seating area, resting the bag at his feet, and sat without speaking. The air between him and the nearest passenger felt like a thin glass wall, clear, fragile, and meant to separate. No one crossed it. A teenage boy glanced at him, curiosity flickering in his expression before his mother's hand landed lightly on his arm, turning him away. Sir. Marcus looked up. An older attendant stood nearby, voice soft. Your gate is boarding soon, he nodded, rising. Thank you. She hesitated before adding, some people don't see what they're doing. He met her gaze, holding it. They see. They just look away. Her lips pressed together, no reply coming. As Marcus walked toward the gate, the whispers had stopped, but the silence left in their place felt sharper. It wasn't approval. It wasn't apology. It was the quiet acknowledgement of witnesses who wouldn't intervene, but also wouldn't forget. He stepped into the boarding line, the hum of the terminal fading behind him. The sound of his own measured breathing was louder than the overhead announcements. Each inhale and exhale steady, the only thing he could still control. ChatGPT said. I just want to understand, Marcus said, his tone even, almost conversational. Why was I stopped? Grant adjusted his tie, glancing toward the nearby staff. Standard procedure for everyone, Marcus asked. Grant's jaw shifted. When necessary. Marcus tilted his head slightly. And you decided it was necessary for me? Grant's eyes flickered, not anger, not yet, but something uneasy. I'm not here to debate policy. You approached me, you asked the questions, I answered them all, and still, I was delayed. Around them, the hum of the terminal felt louder, though no one directly looked their way. Grant's voice grew clipped. You're making this into something it's not. Marcus leaned back just slightly, a quiet exhale escaping. It's always nothing, until it's not. Grant shifted his weight, the confidence in his posture beginning to falter. You're reading too much into it. I've lived long enough to know a pattern when I see one, Marcus said. His voice didn't waver, and the politeness, that's just the wrapping. Grant glanced to the side, avoiding his gaze. A security colleague walked past, hesitated, then kept going. This conversation's over, Grant muttered. No, Marcus replied softly. You're just done having it. Grant's shoulders stiffened. He didn't speak again. Marcus picked up his bag, the movement unhurried. He didn't look back, and in that silence, Grant seemed smaller, his earlier authority shrinking under the weight of what hadn't been shouted, only stated. The distance between them grew with each step Marcus took toward the boarding gate, leaving Grant alone in a space that suddenly felt far more exposed. Grant's gaze stayed fixed on Marcus, but it wasn't focus. It was a narrowing, as though Marcus's presence was a problem to be managed, not a person to be understood. Step aside for another moment, Grant said, voice steady but clipped. Marcus's jaw tightened. We've been doing moments for 15 minutes. Grant's eyes flicked to the growing cluster of travelers. Phones were up now, some discreet, others openly filming. You think this matters, he murmured, low enough for only Marcus to hear. It matters to me, Marcus replied, his tone flat but weighty. A pause stretched. The air between them felt heavier, thicker. Grant cleared his throat. I have a job to do, and I have a flight to catch, Marcus said. Same as everyone else here. Grant shifted his stance, but his authority, once effortless, now looked forced. He avoided the phones, glancing at a distant corner as though an escape route might appear. You could just cooperate, he said. I already did, Marcus replied. That's the part you keep skipping. A murmur moved through the onlookers. Someone whispered, it's on live now. Grant's nostrils flared. He straightened, but not in confidence. It was armor. "This is over," he said. Finally, Marcus nodded once. "Yes, it is." He stepped forward. Grant didn't stop him this time. The onlookers parted, their eyes lingering not on Marcus but on the man in the uniform, suddenly smaller in his space. The silence that followed wasn't relief, it was the kind that pressed against skin, the kind that made a man realize the room had started seeing him differently. Grant didn't meet anyone's gaze. He didn't need to. The shift had already happened. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor, the sound steady, unhurried. Marcus's eyes followed her approach, and a faint relief touched his features, not quite a smile, but something loosening. Grant's voice cut in, still clipped. "You're free to board now. Go." Marcus didn't move. "I think I'll wait a second." Grant frowned. "For what?" The woman stopped just behind him. "For me," she said. Grant turned, his posture stiffening when he saw her. "Ma'am, don't ma'am me, Officer Grant." Her tone was low, controlled, but it carried the kind of weight that silenced the nearest onlookers. "Step aside." Grant hesitated. "This isn't asterisk, it is," she interrupted. "Every second of it." Marcus stayed quiet, letting the air settle. He could see Grant's composure fraying in the twitch of his jaw. The woman glanced at Marcus. "You all right?" He nodded once. "Better now." She looked back at Grant. "Do you understand how many people just watched you mishandle this?" Was following protocol," Grant said. Her gaze sharpened. "No, you were following bias. There's a difference." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Grant's shoulders drew inward, his eyes avoiding theirs. The woman stepped closer. "I know exactly who you report to." Grant swallowed. "Understood." She turned to Marcus. "Let's walk." Marcus moved beside her, leaving Grant planted in place, his authority suddenly hollow. The crowd's attention shifted away from Marcus entirely and landed on the man who now looked very small in his uniform. No one spoke, but the silence said enough. Grant's hand stayed buried in the bag, like pulling it out might mean admitting he'd gone too far. Marcus didn't move, his eyes fixed on the man's face, watching for the smallest flicker. The footsteps came closer, slow, steady, unhurried. A whisper passed between two people near the rope line, but no one laughed now. "Is there a problem?" Here the voice was calm, but it carried. Grant straightened, still holding the bag's flap. "Routine security check." Marcus felt the weight of her presence before he looked at her. "It's not routine," he said quietly. Grant's jaw tightened. "You can wait outside the boarding area, sir. This is unnecessary." She cut in. Her eyes didn't leave him. For a beat, the room seemed to still. Marcus could hear the hum of an overhead light, the faint shuffle of shoes on tile. Grant let go of the bag, almost reluctantly, like he was surrendering something more than just a search. The woman stepped forward. "Close it," she said to Marcus. He zipped it shut without breaking her gaze. Grant's shoulders squared, but his voice lost a thread of its edge. "You're interfering." "No," she said, her tone soft enough to force him to lean in. "I'm remembering your name." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. A few passengers shifted their weight, their attention anchored to the small standoff. Grant stepped back. Not much, but enough. But enough. Marcus felt the knot in his chest loosen. "Let's go," the woman said. He walked beside her, leaving Grant in the same spot, his hands suddenly empty. The eyes that had been on Marcus now lingered on him instead, and stayed there. Grant's hand was still near Marcus's bag when she approached, her heels making the kind of sound that made people turn without knowing why. Conversations softened. The air felt closer. "Mr. Grant," she said, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the hum. He straightened, his name catching in his throat. "Routine check. Ms. Rivera." She didn't glance at Marcus yet. "Routine. You've stopped him twice this month." Grant's lips pressed together, following protocol. "No," she said, stepping closer. "You're following something else." Marcus could feel his pulse in his jaw, the heat in the back of his neck. He wanted to say something, but her tone told him to hold still. Grant's fingers twitched, a half move toward the bag before pulling back. "You're making assumptions." Linda's gaze didn't move. "I'm making observations." A few passengers shifted. The silence wasn't empty, it was listening. "Can leave now," Grant said finally, his voice losing its earlier weight. She let a beat pass. "No, he can board." Marcus exhaled, slow, steady. Grant's eyes flickered between them, a flash of something, maybe anger, maybe calculation. Next words were barely above a whisper. "And Grant, remember who was watching." It landed heavier than if she'd shouted. He stepped back, jaw tight, shoulders squared, but smaller somehow. Marcus picked up his bag. The rope line opened without a word. As they walked away, he caught Herprofile.com. Unshaken. The air behind them felt colder. For the first time that morning, Grant didn't have an audience. Her voice didn't rise. But it cut through the terminal like a bell. Officer Huxley. A word. He turned, half smirk still in place, until she added, "No, you're in the middle of a lawsuit waiting to happen." The smirk died. Around them, footsteps slowed. Conversations blurred into whispers. "I don't know what you think you're implying," he said, voice tight. "I'm not implying," Linda replied. "I'm telling you, 2 stops in 1 month for the same passenger. That's not security. That's targeting." Huxley's jaw flexed. "Following procedures." "Then your procedures are broken," she said, stepping closer. Marcus shifted his weight, the strap of his bag digging into his palm. Part of him wanted to step back, but her presence anchored him. "You're making this into something it's not," Huxley said. "Quieter now." "No," Linda said, her gaze locked on him. "You did that when you made him the suspect before you knew his name." The silence between them stretched. Someone coughed. "You should walk away, Ms. Rivera," he muttered. "Not until he boards." Huxley's eyes darted toward the small crowd forming. The authority in his stance wavered. "Fine. Good." Marcus exhaled, the air tasting different now. Linda gave a small nod, not to him, but to the onlookers. A subtle reminder they'd seen this too. As they walked toward the gate, Marcus glanced back. Huxley was standing rigid, but his face looked smaller than before. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the first time the floor had shifted under him. Grant's hand froze midair, still holding the edge of the boarding pass. Linda's voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Do you know who this is?" The agent's brow furrowed. "Another passenger." "This is Marcus Reed," Linda cut in, board chair of the airport authority. The color drained from Grant's face so quickly it was almost visible. A faint shuffle of movement came from the line behind them, the sound of people leaning in without trying to. Grant swallowed. "I wasn't aware." "You didn't ask," Linda said evenly. "You assumed." Marcus kept his gaze fixed on the counter. Every instinct told him to say something sharp, but he didn't. He let the silence sit there, filling the space in ways words couldn't. Grant cleared his throat. "I was just following procedure." "Procedure doesn't require humiliation," Linda replied. The air around them shifted. The agent's earlier confidence was slipping, his stance loosening as though the ground beneath him had tilted. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low. "Do you treat all board members like this, or just the black ones?" Grant flinched a small movement, but telling, "I apologize for any misunderstanding." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Marcus said, still calm. "It was a choice." For a moment, no one moved. Even the tapping of keyboards at nearby counters had stopped. Grant stepped back, handing the boarding pass with both hands now, like it might change the weight of what had happened. Linda took it without breaking her gaze. "We'll be noting this interaction." Marcus turned toward the gate. Grant's voice didn't follow. The power in the room had shifted, not loudly, not violently, but completely. Grant's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His fingers twitched at his sides like he might reach for something, an excuse, a defense, but found only air. Linda didn't look away. "Turn in your badge," she said, her voice steady, stripped of any rise or fall. He blinked. "You're serious?" Marcus's tone carried no heat. "We're past serious." Grant's gaze flicked to the line of passengers, watching from a distance. No one pretended to be busy anymore. The space had turned into an unspoken courtroom, and the verdict was already known. Grant started, but Marcus's eyes held him still. "You didn't see me," Marcus said. "You saw what you wanted me to be." The words landed without volume, but with weight that made Grant's throat tighten. For a long beat, no one moved. Somewhere down the hall, a boarding call echoed, but here, time felt sealed off. Grant reached into his pocket and placed the badge on the counter. His hand lingered there a second too long, like it might anchor him. "Leave it," Linda said quietly. He pulled his hand back, eyes lowered now. His earlier edge had vanished, replaced by something smaller, the realization that this moment would follow him long after he walked away. Without another word, Grant stepped aside. The shift in the room was immediate. Not celebration, not gloating, just a quiet understanding that something had been corrected. Marcus picked up the boarding pass and met Linda's eyes for a brief nod. They moved toward the gate together, leaving behind the echo of a truth that had been spoken without a single raised voice. Sometimes justice didn't arrive in shouts. Sometimes it whispered and stayed. The clock on the wall ticked too loud. In the stillness, Grant sat hunched over the table, staring at his phone like it might suddenly light up. It didn't. He thumbed through old messages, stopping on ones he'd never answered. Favors asked, jokes shared, the casual ease of a man who thought the world had no sharp edges. The phone buzzed once, his breath catching, only for the screen to show a blank reminder. He set it down slowly, as if admitting the truth would make it more real, that the union's statement sat open on his laptop. Words like procedural fairness and commitment to community standards dressed up what was, in plain language, a public washing of hands. A chair scraped in his head. Marcus's. From that day, he could still hear the measured voice. You saw what you wanted me to be. His sister had called once after it all broke. You should apologize, Grant, she'd said, tone heavy. He'd hung up halfway through her sentence. She never called back. The fridge hummed. Outside, a delivery truck rolled past. Inside, the air felt too thick to breathe. He scrolled through contacts again, finger hovering over names, but no one felt safe. No one would answer like they used to. From the counter, the phone stayed still. Not ringing wasn't the worst part. It was knowing it wouldn't. Grant leaned back, staring at the ceiling as though it might offer an explanation. It didn't. The silence pressed in, not empty but full of what had been taken, and of what he'd given away without even noticing. When the phone finally lit up that night, it was only the low battery warning, glowing like a reminder of something already too late to save. The first clip Grant saw was grainy, filmed from a phone at an angle that made him look taller, meaner. He scrolled without sound, but the captions were enough. Racist staffer humiliates passenger. The next clip had music over it, mocking, upbeat, paired with freeze frames of his face. He clicked away, but the images stayed burned into him. At the coffee shop, a man at the counter turned his back. When Grant stepped in, two teenagers whispered near the door, one lifting their phone just enough to snap a photo. At home, the laptop's glow lit the room. Comment threads scrolled endlessly, strangers dissecting his tone, his body language, his smirk. Others swore they'd met him before, claimed he'd done the same to them. It didn't matter if it was true online, truth was just whatever people wanted to believe. His phone buzzed. A message from Rob, might be best to stay offline for a while. Grant typed back, this will blow over, but didn't hit send. He knew, it wouldn't. In the hallway mirror, he caught himself adjusting his collar like he was still at work. Old habits. The reflection stared back the same man, but not the same name. Walking to the corner store, he noticed a woman steer her child to the other side of the sidewalk. Her eyes flicked to his face, then away fast, like touching something sharp. That night, he sat at the kitchen table, laptop closed, phone face down, silence pressed against him, heavier than the noise online. Somewhere out there, people were laughing at a version of him they'd never met, and for the first time, he understood they weren't just taking his job. They were taking the only thing he'd carried without question. His name. The hum of the terminal was the same, but the air felt different. Marcus adjusted his tie, not for vanity, but to steady his hands. The cameras snapped in quick bursts, each flash freezing him in the same spot where weeks ago humiliation had taken root. The airport manager stood off to the side, arms crossed. He didn't meet Marcus's eyes. Mr. Lewis, a reporter called. Why come back here? Marcus paused. Because dignity should never be situational. His voice was low, even, but the weight behind it pressed through the room. A few in the crowd nodded. The manager's jaw tightened. This isn't about me, Marcus continued. It's about every passenger who's been treated like they didn't belong. Respect should not be a privilege. It's a right. Applause broke, cautious at first, then steadier. Some clapped with conviction. Others just followed the sound. The manager finally stepped forward. We regret the incident, he said, the words brittle. We'll review procedures. Marcus looked at him, not unkindly. You'll do more than review. Starting today, this airport is adopting a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, signed, sealed, and public. He handed over the document. Cameras surged forward. The manager took it, but his grip was unsteady. Marcus didn't smile. He simply nodded to the staff gathered nearby, some of whom looked almost relieved. As he turned to leave, a woman in uniform whispered, "Thank you." He didn't slow, didn't look back. Justice didn't need a victory lap. It just needed to be in place, so no one else would stand here feeling small. Outside, the sun hit his suit like a spotlight. This time, the walk to his car felt lighter. Grant sat in the far corner, the hum of the espresso machine masking just enough of the conversation to make him strain to hear. Yeah, that's him. The one from the news, a man at the counter whispered. Thought he could get away with it. The spoon in Grant's hand clinked against the cup. He didn't look up, didn't need to. He'd heard the same tone for weeks, a mix of satisfaction and disgust, like people savoring a story they'd never lived. A woman slid into the seat across from him without asking. Her coat was still damp from the rain. You think hiding here makes it go away? Her voice was low. Grant's jaw tightened. I'm not hiding, she leaned in. Everywhere you go they'll know. You built that yourself. The cafe air felt thicker. Grant stared at the table. I was doing my job. No, she said, almost gently. You were doing what you could get away with. The words landed heavier than she seemed to intend. He wanted to argue, to push back, but the clinking cups and quiet chatter around them made it impossible to ignore how small his voice would sound here. From the counter, another voice murmured, "That's him, right?" "Yeah, it's him." Grant's hand hovered over his coffee, but he didn't drink. For the first time, he wondered if the name they spoke wasn't his anymore. Just the headline, the scandal, the warning. She stood to leave. You can't outrun it, she said, stepping into the rain. Grant stayed still, listening, as someone laughed in the distance. He stirred the coffee again, slower this time, as if trying to make the sound drown out his own name.